All right, diving in again today. And get this, we're tackling Prince Harry's autobiography, Spare.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that one's everywhere.
It is, but we're going deeper than just the headlines,
Okay,
okay?
I'm ready.
We're using excerpts from the audiobook on Amazon, and that includes, actual customer reviews, like what people are saying about it.
Oh, interesting. So not just what Harry's saying, but how it's landing.
Exactly. It's like a multidimensional view.
Oh, yeah.
So think of this deep dive as like your spare cheat sheet, the deeper stuff, the reactions, all that.
Cool. I'm all for cheat sheets.
Ready to jump in?
Definitely. Let's do it.
Okay, so that title, Spare, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's catchy, but
It's more than catchy, right? Like Harry really uses that to dig into always being the plan B.
like the understudy who never quite gets the lead role.
Yes. Always ready, but might never get that chance to shine.
Exactly. And Harry's honest about how tough that is, emotionally.
Yeah, he doesn't hold back. He talks about self-worth, feeling overshadowed, even like, what's my purpose here?
It's raw, vulnerable. And I think that's why it's hitting home for so many people.
It's super vulnerable, especially when he's like needing permission for the smallest things.
Oh, right, like what?
He talks about needing permission to grow a beard for his wedding.
Wow, seriously. You'd think that'd be like a personal choice.
Right. It really shows how constrained royal life is. Like, even those little choices are under a microscope.
Totally. But it also kind of humanizes them a bit, don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. Especially when he's talking about, school days with William. It's just like any brothers.
Yeah, teasing each other, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So we see that tension, right? Duty versus just being you. It's not just history, it's a human story.
And that story gets, well, a bit darker when Harry talks about the media.
Yeah, that's where things get intense. He's really upfront about the pressure, especially from those British tabloids.
He even says the palace was working with the press, like feeding them stories to protect themselves.
Big accusation, right? And some people totally back him up, sharing their own stories of how the media's been awful to them.
It raises those questions about, like, journalistic ethics.
Yeah.
Where's the line?
For sure. It's like the palace needs good press, but those tabloids, they thrive on the drama even if it hurts people.
Exactly. So Harry's saying those personal constraints are amplified by the media frenzy. And he names names too, right?
He does, which leads to, well, a lot of different reactions.
Right. Some people are like, this is so insightful, he's so honest. Others think he's betraying the family.
Like it's a mirror, right? Depending on how you view the royals, the media, this book will confirm your biases.
Interesting. And that mix of opinions is what makes this deep dive so cool.
Yeah, it's not about being right or wrong, but seeing all the different sides, the forces at play, all that.
I'm into that. So where do we go from here?
Well, let's dig into how Spare challenges our whole idea of what it even means to be royal today.
Sounds good. Because I think Harry's pushing some boundaries here.
Oh, definitely. He's saying things a royal probably wouldn't have said before. Like, he talks about therapy, panic attacks, even being insecure.
He's not just talking fancy dinners and waving from a carriage.
Not at all. It's way more personal. Like, remember that part where he talks about his time in the military?
Oh, right. Almost like that was an escape for him.
It seems like it. A way to prove himself outside of being Prince Harry.
Yeah.
He talks about the camaraderie, the purpose he felt.
Totally different world than, formal events and all that scrutiny.
Right. But he doesn't sugarcoat it either. He's upfront about how tough war is, the emotional toll.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even princes go through trauma, hard times, just like anyone else.
Absolutely. And he even reflects on his own privilege, how that shaped his views. Like, remember the Nazi uniform incident?
Oh, yeah, that caused a lot of controversy.
It did, but he doesn't shy away from it. He owns up to it.
Like, he's using this book not just to tell his story, but to also learn from his mistakes, even challenge his own biases.
And I think that's why it resonates with people. They see him growing, becoming self-aware.
It's inspiring in a way. Shows that no matter who you are, we can all grow, learn.
It's a powerful message, especially coming from someone who, could have easily just stayed silent.
True, true. So it's a memoir, but it's also a commentary on, like, society, the media, and even a call to look inward a bit.
Right. Like he's making us think about how we contribute to these systems, whether it's the gossip or just accepting things without questioning.
And that's huge, because at the end of the day, whether you're a prince or not, we're all just human.
Exactly. We all want that same thing to be ourselves, find our purpose.
And Spare lets us peek into that struggle, even if it's in a royal setting.
Which I think is what makes this deep dive so fascinating. It's not just a book, it's about what it means to be human.
Totally agree. And you mentioned earlier about the audiobook format.
Oh, yeah. Hearing Harry actually tell his story, it adds a whole other layer to it, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, you connect with him on a different level. You know,
Yeah.
you can hear the emotion in his voice.
A lot of the reviews mention that, how raw and vulnerable it sounds.
Imagine hearing him describe, like, his mother's death or just how much he loves Meghan.
It's totally different than reading it.
Huge difference. And it's his choice.
Yeah.
You know, he could have had someone else narrate it.
That's true. It shows how much he wants to own this story, connect directly with people.
It breaks down those walls between royalty and, well, everyone else.
So we've talked themes, controversies, but that audiobook format, that's a big part of the experience too.
Oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
makes it more intimate, more real.
Like we're right there with him.
Exactly. And for those listening who haven't dived into Spare yet, would you say it's worth it?
I always say, form your own opinion, but hearing Harry tell his story himself, that adds so much.
You can just feel that raw emotion in his voice. Much more than on the page.
Yeah, there's something powerful about that, especially with a story like his that's been so dissected in the media.
And there are those subtle things you pick up on in the audiobook, like the way his voice changes before he talks about certain people.
Or when he's talking about really tough memories.
It gives you more context,
Yeah.
not just what happened, but how deeply it affected him.
It's like those details add another layer of meaning.
Hmm.
And that's what makes it more than just a typical royal tell-all, you know.
Right, it makes you think about those bigger questions about family, loyalty, all of that.
And speaking of those bigger questions, if this book is about finding your own voice, what does that say to the rest of us?
Oh, that's good. Like, how does it inspire people who aren't royalty to break free from expectations?
Exactly. Because even a prince felt trapped, had to fight for that freedom.
It's a powerful message,
Yeah.
right? About being authentic, even when it's hard.
It's almost like he's saying, hey, look at me. If I can do it, so can you.
And that resonates with people because we all face those pressures, right?
Yeah.
Family, work, just figuring out life.
So Spare gives us this unique perspective, but it's also about those universal struggles we all have.
It's like a reminder that everyone's on a journey, and it's not always easy.
Well said. So we've covered a lot, Harry's story, public reactions, and even how this all connects back to us.
We went beyond the headlines for sure.
And if this deep dive made you curious, check out the book, especially the audiobook. Hearing it from Harry himself might surprise you.
I agree. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring and keep asking those big questions.
So it's interesting, right? Like Spare kind of makes us rethink what it means to be royal in this day and age.
Yeah, totally. It's like, can you imagine the pressure, all that tradition, but
Yeah.
also trying to, be your own person?
Yeah, it's like, are you even allowed to be an individual?
Right, like trapped in this gilded cage, always on display.
And Harry's like pushing against those bars, saying things royals don't usually say.
Like what kind of things?
He talks about going to therapy, having panic attacks, even just feeling insecure.
Whoa. It's not all fancy dinners and like waving to crowds.
It's definitely not. And remember that part where he talks about being in the military?
Oh, yeah, yeah. It seemed like that was almost a refuge for him.
It does, right. Like he could prove himself, but not as Prince Harry, just as Harry. He loved that camaraderie, the purpose.
Yeah, totally different than all those formal events.
Right. But he's also honest about how tough it was, how war messed with him, you know?
Yeah, he doesn't sugarcoat it. It reminds you that even princes go through trauma, deal with hard stuff.
Absolutely. And then he even talks about his privilege, how that shaped him. Like, remember that whole Nazi uniform thing?
Oh, gosh, yeah, that was...
It's a huge deal. But he owns up to it, doesn't try to hide it.
It's almost like he's using this book to, like, hold himself accountable, too. Not just tell his story, but grow from it.
And that's what people see, I think. He's not perfect. He makes mistakes, but he's trying to learn.
It's kind of inspiring, actually. Like, no matter who you are, we can all evolve.
It's a powerful message,
Yeah.
especially from someone who could have easily just kept quiet, you know?
Right. So it's a memoir, sure, but it's also a statement about society, the media.
Mm-hmm.
It even makes us look inward.
Makes you think, right? Like, how do we play a part in these systems? The gossip, just accepting things without question.
Yeah, it's deep stuff. But at the core, it's a reminder that whether you're a prince or not, we're all just human.
Exactly. We have those same desires to be ourselves, find our purpose, all that.
And Spare gives us a glimpse into that struggle, even if it's like in this crazy royal context.
Which makes this deep dive so cool. It's not just a book, it's about being human.
Totally. Speaking of which, you mentioned the audiobook format earlier.
Oh, yeah. Hearing Harry actually tell his own story, it's like a whole other level of realness, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, you connect with him differently when you hear his voice.
The reviews talk about that a lot, how raw and vulnerable he sounds.
I can imagine. Like, hearing him describe his mom's death or his love for Megan in his own words.
It hits different than reading it, right?
Totally. And it was his choice, too, to narrate it himself. He could have had someone else do it.
That's right. It shows he's really committed to owning this, connecting with people directly.
Yeah, it takes down those walls between royalty and everyone else. You feel like you're just hearing a guy tell his story.
So we've talked about the themes, the controversy, but that audiobook format, that's a big part of the experience.
Absolutely. It makes it so much more intimate, more real.
Like we're right there with him, hearing it all unfold.
Exactly. And I'm curious, for those listening who haven't checked out Spare yet, do you think it's worth it?
I think it's always up to each person, but hearing Harry tell his story in his own voice, there's just something so powerful about that.
Yeah, you can really feel the emotion, more than just reading the words on the page.
Especially with a story like his that's been, all over the media, dissected every which way.
And there are those subtle things you pick up in the audiobook, like the pauses, the changes in his voice when he talks about certain people.
Or those really hard memories.
It adds so much. You get the context, not just what happened, but how it impacted him.
It's like those little details bring a whole other layer of meaning. And that's what makes Spare more than just, another royal tell-all.
For sure. It makes you think about the big stuff, family, loyalty, all that.
And speaking of thinking about the big stuff, if Spare is ultimately about Harry finding his own voice, what does that say to us?
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
Like, how does it inspire people who aren't royalty to break free from expectations?
Exactly. Because even a prince felt trapped, had to fight for that freedom.
It's a strong message, like, be authentic, even when it's tough.
It's almost like he's saying, look, if I can do it, so can you.
Yeah, and that resonates with people. Because we all face those pressures, family, work, just figuring out life in general.
So Spare gives us this unique perspective, but it's also about the universal struggles we all share.
Yeah, like a reminder that everyone's on a journey, and those journeys aren't always easy or straightforward.
Well said. So we've covered a lot. Harry's story, the reactions, and how all of this connects back to us.
We definitely went beyond the headlines.
And if you're curious, check out the book, especially the audiobook. Hearing Harry tell it himself might surprise you.
I agree. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, and don't be afraid to ask the tough questions. It really does. And I think that's what elevates this, beyond just your typical royal drama.
Right, it gets at something bigger.
Yeah, like it forces us to think about family, loyalty, that price of fame, too.
And speaking of those deeper questions, right? If Spare is about finding your voice, what does that say to the rest of us?
Good point.
Like, what can people who aren't royalty take away from this about challenging those expectations, all that?
Well, I think it reminds us that we all have that right to define our own lives. Even a prince felt trapped, had to fight to break free.
Wow, yeah.
A powerful message, right? Being authentic, even when it's tough.
It's like a call to action almost, isn't it? Look at the roles we're given, the expectations. Do they even fit who we are?
Exactly. And then having the guts to change things, even if it's hard or people judge you.
Harry's journey, as messy as it is, it's about that, right? Finding his own truth.
And that's something we can all relate to, whether it's family stuff, work, just trying to figure out where we fit in.
Exactly. Spare gives us a way to look at those struggles, even if it's through this royal lens.
It's like a reminder that we're all on our own path. And those paths, they're rarely ever straight lines.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Spare, I think we covered a lot, huh? The big themes, how people are reacting.
We did, and how it all connects back to us, our own lives.
And for anyone listening who's now super curious, definitely explore the book, especially the audiobook. Hearing Harry tell it in his own words, it might surprise you.
It will. Until next time, everyone, keep exploring and keep those questions coming.